Welcome to a podcast about the adventures of a divorced entrepreneurial father. Now, this is a hub of stories, cautionary tales, and life lessons behind the daily struggle to do better and be better and ultimately to find new sparks in life. And even if no one listens to any of these episodes, but I leave something behind for my children that sparks something in or even for them, well, that's good enough for me. However, if you do like what you hear on Spark Hub, please support us by linking to the show notes below each episode. And once you're there, please consider subscribing to this podcast on the platform of your choice. And for the best experience, our newsletter gives you the inside scoop, exclusive content, and advanced previews of what's coming next. And by the way, your data is always private with us. We don't sell it, and you can unsubscribe from all of that at any time you want without judgment. So let's begin. My name is Allan, and I have a heck of a story for you. It's been a while since I've recorded anything and frankly, just been busy, but really just facing battles, if I'm brutally honest, and that's the subject of today's episode. A lot of things have happened since we moved out. I moved into my new place and my ex a week later into hers. It's been full of injuries, mental and physical, oil shortages, shocks, but fundamentally what today is about a poem that somebody wrote about my house, and a poem that is going to form the basis of what I do next with the current place I live in. Hence the title of this episode, as well as the cover art, really feeds the title. This is where we learn to rebuild. At the time I'm recording this, I'm actually sitting in a hotel room. Well, I shouldn't say hotel, a Premier Inn room in Sheffield in the north of England, and everyone talks funny here, but they're really, really friendly. And I'm here because one of my startups called Rain Wellbeing is about to launch. It's sort of been 7 years in the making, and I think I have covered it in other episodes, but it's been ups and downs and sideways and different partners and different leaders, and it's been a whole journey. And it sort of echoes, I feel, what's happened kind of in the past 6 to 7 weeks. So about a month and a half ago, my ex finally moved into her new place. I was living down the road 9 days earlier than when she left. And there's been a heck of a lot of transformation crunched into these past few weeks. It covers everything from social media to part-time parenting to getting injured to oil issues. But as you'll hear at the end, a poem written by someone who came to my house really gave me hope for the future. But before I get to that, I just think that to start with, I have to describe how lonely things were. When I was in my new house, I felt like I was living like a student. It was maybe a third or a quarter of the size of the house that we built together, a 4-bedroom detached home, and it shrunk to a 2-bedroom attached home. But interestingly, the land around the house is massive, and it's about the same size as what I had before. But being in the house was tough. You know, not all your furniture's set up, the house isn't set up. You're living amongst boxes, you can't remember where anything is. Money's tight, so you can't exactly order new stuff quickly. And that was sort of the scene for me for a very long time. And in all of that, I was trying to host my children on the weekends when I get them and on the days when I get them, and help my eldest with his homeschool and my youngest, who's still in elementary school up until July, just finishing up. He's going into high school, and I just can't believe we're there in terms of timing. And it's very easy, I guess, to get sucked into that world of isolation and depression. And I think back to what my brother went through and how it affected him and how we spiraled. And I started really to start using meditation apps to keep busy. But thankfully, a lot of friends came to visit. People who came out to support me, not just morally, but just help me get shelves drilled up or come up with ideas for the house, or, just kind of help me look at the design. And one thing I will admit, as good as I am at creating and transforming businesses, I feel overwhelmed when it comes to interior decorating, both, getting stuff up on the wall. And by the way, caveat, it's not that I'm afraid to use tools. It's just that the house I'm in is a period cottage. Everything's on an angle. The ceiling slopes down in my kitchen. And if I walk from one end of my kitchen to the other, my head will actually hit the ceiling. And the room above the kitchen is on if you put a marble down, it will just roll to the other side of the room, which makes it handy to play catch. It's a period cottage, and I'm renting it, and it's got quirks. And I'm just scared to do any kind of small renovations like drilling stuff when I hear that there's all kinds of different types of wood that I don't know about. So thankfully, I'm surrounded by a few carpenters, and they came and they helped me out. And A friend of mine really, really helped me out by coming to my house, sitting down in each room, sort of absorbing it. And then she went away and wrote up a whole document about what this house stands for. And as part of the cover art, you will see that someone gave me a card, a welcome card, where they basically created a piece of art out of the home. And I held that up against the house, and I thought it was quite symbolic. So that really lifted my spirits that I could co-design a space. Obviously, I can involve my kids. It's not happening fast enough. There's still loads of stuff lying around. I've rented a barn where I'm overstoring a lot of their personal things, and it's just a case of sifting through 16 years of marriage and children and businesses and sort of trying to make sense of it all. And I don't really get enough time to do that. And most recently, which we'll come to in a minute, I tried to start doing new things again. And I want to talk about social media. I've had a Facebook account since Facebook was born. I've had Instagram since Instagram got hot. But around 2023, so about maybe 3-4 years ago, I just stopped posting. And I found that for me, social media was a toilet. It was a place of bragging. In some cases, great shopping and funny memes, but that's gold dust amongst everything else that flies up. People bragging or humbragging or using passive aggressive language or just trying to show off or present a life that isn't true. And when you see them in real life, you think, wait a minute, this is a fake Vegas show. And I felt that for the longest time, social media didn't add any value. And my ex and I agreed we would never post our children on there unless it was from the back. We'd never post their photos or try to accessorize or merchandise our children on social media, partially because of, I suppose, a fear of facial recognition, but also because of the way the algorithms work. Now, in the early days, I recall that I set up my status as single, and I was served all kinds of ads for dating sites, and then I changed it to engaged, and suddenly I was seeing ads for photographers and for wedding venues and flower shops, you name it. Then once I changed my status to married, it seemed to be holidays and children's products. And then about 7 years in, I kept seeing ads for something called Ashley Madison. And Ashley Madison was basically a dating site to have affairs for married people. And why they targeted 7 years since I marked myself married, I don't know. But there's a documentary about how much scandal that was and how all these people signed up and then their emails got dumped online and partners could search and see if their partners were on there. It was a big money grab. And I think that's where I come to with social media. It seems like the incentives aren't really to connect people. It seems to disconnect people. And throughout COVID and political debates, it seemed that whole media space became a pay-to-play engine, and for anyone who knew how to juice the algorithms. So I didn't trust it. And I still don't to many degrees, but I feel that I've started posting on social media again because it helps me create. So I'm trying to flip the narrative now. I have marked myself as single, by the way, and I'm starting to post stories about things that are happening around me, about transformation. And soon I might even start posting about Spark Up the podcast. I just haven't really put much effort into it. I've kind of done this for my own therapeutic reasons. I don't know how many people are listening, and frankly, I don't care. As long as my kids have a record of me and the things I'm going through and they can use it as a tool in their future, then that's victory. Anything else is a bonus. So yeah, I've interestingly got 500 views on stuff that I've put up, and it's just me talking about life and trying to celebrate key moments in my life and key friendships. But I'm finding it hard to be a part-time parent. It's hard to downshift from waking up every day, making breakfast and lunches and getting the house sorted and all of that, to suddenly seeing your kids intermittently. And thankfully, I see them on a Monday and a Friday and then every second weekend. And so far, that seems to be working. And Max and I are making it work. And we're only an 8-9 minute drive apart in different places. But I guess it's working. And when the kids come to me, they have a nice landscape where they can go and chop wood and light fires and do things that kids need to do. I just haven't really set up my outbuilding in my barn yet. It's just stuffed with things I just need to get around to. And that brings me to an injury. About 2 weeks ago, I started to ache in my back and my knees, and I just ignored it and kept going. And then eventually a lot of pain in my left leg. And I went to see a friend who's a physio, and she said, basically, your glute and your hip flexor on your left are not as strong as on your right. What have you been doing these past few weeks? Well, climbing ladders, painting, drilling, lifting heavy boxes, shifting stuff out of lofts, picking up piles and piles of wood. which we'll come to in a minute, and ultimately just trying to build a new home. And there's the physical strain I've put on my body, which, by the way, is 49 years old. There's a lack of training. I haven't, trained or stretched properly in a long time. And I think just the paralysis of waking up every day and just not hearing my kids anymore, except for certain times. Maybe that all just manifested. And as I speak now, I've had a couple of bad days where I walk like I've been shot in the thigh. And some days it's better and I'm taking advice and stretching and doing everything I'm supposed to. But it's clear my body's told me to slow down. And that was frustrating because last weekend I had so much to do in terms of getting the house ready for the kids. But as my friends who are in the same boat tell me, I'm actually ahead of the game. And I know I have an over eager sense of urgency, and I know I'm ambitious, and I know that I keep driving forward. And maybe that's a bug or a feature. I don't know. Depends who you ask. But it certainly culminated and manifested in an injury. And I have to now take the time to slow down. Even if I'm launching something that's been 7 years in the making, I have to make sure I'm still around. So that happened. And then I suppose the other interesting thing I'd like to mention before we dive into what's next is where I live rather, still runs on kerosene oil. It's an old school village, and there's no gas mains coming through, and that's on purpose. So big oil tanks sit outside of everyone's home, and that feeds your hot water and it feeds your central heating. And of course, February and March are very cold months. And so what was worrying was I ordered some oil for my home so that when the kids around, I can heat the place. And it was 68 pence a liter. And I ordered it at that price. And it usually comes in 5 to 7 days. And then one day when I was in London and severely delayed because someone had taken their own life by jumping under the train, and I was just contemplating that things could always get worse, I got an email from the oil company called Boiler Juice saying, sorry, we can't deliver your oil today. We're going to give you a refund, but because of the situation in the Middle East, if you want more oil, you have to order at a new price tomorrow. And the day after I checked, and it was £1.70, so nearly triple. And the minimum order is 500 liters. So this has been month 2 of a financial adjustment. And by that, I mean finding enough money to pay for just the basics in a cost of living crisis on top of paying child support, which I'm not adverse to. It's just it fluctuates with my income. And then suddenly to get that message that basically the price had tripled and there's no way I could afford to do it. And I went online and my whole village was in an uproar. British people threatening to write letters and talk to politicians and MPs and, the usual. But nothing's going to shift it because there's no legal protection. And then the UK government deployed £60 million to help those affected because the kerosene market is unregulated and uncapped, but a lot of people still rely on it for the basics. But it was only for people of a certain tax band. Anyway, there is a silver lining to this in that throughout several interactions, through friends, through somebody I met on Facebook Marketplace who I bought something off of, I just suddenly was lifting up big heavy logs and lots of wood and dragging it all back to my house. And there's a video I'm going to post in the show notes below on this episode, and you can see how much I gathered. I gathered piles and piles of wood, and I could light a fire in my house because my house has a fireplace, and my kids loved it, and we're all sitting around with a roaring fire and the dog on our laps, and suddenly I thought, you know what, it's not that bad. I then had to go and buy some drums and get like 50 liters of oil just to kind of top myself up and hope the prices regulate. And now my car smells like kerosene. But you know what? I'm starting to realize that I'm very lucky to even be able to do that. And I think that's where I'm getting to is I've come out of a place of living like a student and being isolated. And I just really enjoy the fact that people are helping. And suddenly this house is going to become a space of collaboration. And that now brings us to this document that a friend wrote for me. And I won't say her name yet. She will be revealed in time. She's just a friend to dispel any rumors. But she's one of many who've really come to my house and lifted me up. And there's 2 parts to this. There's a manifesto called the Will's Way Manifesto. And then there's the origin story of the house. So this is the Will's Way. Where there's a Will's, there's a way. We are builders. We are explorers. We are problem solvers. In this home, we speak our wins. We learn from our losses. We build with courage. We choose abundance. We amplify what works, and we reach for the moon. Adventure is education. Money is a tool. Legacy is the goal. Fire warms. Forest teaches. Family builds. This cottage is our headquarters. This tree is our watchtower. This fire is our gathering place. We climb stronger than when we started. The Wills family. And she even said we should all sign it. And that really lifted me up because all around the house she identified ideas and things that we can do. And I think in time I'll make a video about this, but right now it's still a concept. And I end with this, which is the origin story, with a note that it should be read aloud one evening by the fire. There was once a father who found himself standing in a small cottage in a quiet village called Turling. The rooms were smaller than before, the garden was different, the world had shifted, but he knew one thing: where there's a Wills, there's a way. So instead of seeing walls, he saw possibility. Instead of seeing change, he saw adventure. He lit the fire. He climbed the stairs. He looked at the great tree at the bottom of the garden and smiled. This, he said, is where we build. Not just business, not just money, but courage, and ideas and memories that would last longer than any house. The boys didn't know it yet, but this cottage would become their origin story, the place where they learned to amplify, to build, to reach, to explore. And one day, when they look back, they won't remember the difficulty. They will remember the firelight, the bell ringing at the top of the stairs, the apples cut before bed, the fairy lights in the tree. And they will say, that's where Dad showed us the way. I'm going to put all this in the show notes below, but let's see what we build next. Thank you for listening. To support Spark Hub, please have a look at the show notes below this episode or visit thesparkhub.com to sign up for our newsletter, which offers exclusive inside scoops. Just quickly, the music you're hearing is composed by Shi Hao Yan, and the audio engineering is done by Emily Chung. My name is Allan, and I hope that you dream big and something sparked in you today.